HIJKLMNOP QRSTUV WX1Z. Do you know your ABC of how to tell a story? Tell me more, tell me now. If you don't know, then let me tell you how. Hi, this is Rituparna Ghosh, and you're watching ABC of Storytelling by Your Story Bag, where every week we share tips, tricks, techniques, and secrets on storytelling. This week we are on the letter O, and we have two O's for you. One is O for offend, and the other is O for observe. As a storyteller, you will be working with stories, working with varied audiences, some of which who you may know, some others who you don't. So therefore, pick your stories very carefully. Remember, there are cultural nuances, there are cultural sentiments. In a country like India, there are lots of things that we need to be careful about. So be aware that your story or your representation of characters or themes or concepts may offend people. When it comes to storytelling for children, I strongly recommend that parents let children decide what is right and what is wrong. Because after all, that is what we want them to do. We want a child to think for themselves, to gauge the actions in a story, to gauge the actions and behavior patterns of characters, and then decide what is right, what is wrong. So for example, when I started telling Ramayana, my son was about 2.5 years old. And when he first heard the story, he fell in love with Ravan. And really, tell me, where is a child who does not like Ravan? A character with 10 heads? He's great. So when I shared this with some other people that my son loves Ravan, I got to hear that, oh no, tell him that he's supposed to be hated. He's the villain in the story. You cannot like Ravan. But I chose not to listen. Because even at 2.5 years old, I wanted to let my child listen to the story several times and then decide what he wants to do with his liking or dislike. So I told him the story. We read from a book. He watched a video. He watched an enactment in school where his teachers enacted the story. And from between Dasera to Diwali, he heard the story multiple times from varied sources. By the time we came to Diwali, he decided that he didn't like Ravan because he said he must have pulled so hard, it must have hurt Sita. Now this is the experience that I try to bring about in every session that I have. I tell a story in such a way that my audience is forced to think and they listen. I ask questions. Sometimes not thinking is really the big problem. So I know this approach may offend someone, but at the same time I tell them there is the only little hope that we have with our children. Let's not dictate to them what they have to think. Let's not dictate to them what they have to know about certain stories. Let them decide for themselves, because after all, a story is a story is a story. It impacts them in a very, very strong way. So let a child derive meaning from it, even if it is mythology in India. Don't force a child to take back a certain definite meaning from every story that they listen to. I know this approach may also offend people, so therefore I say that that's my unique approach to storytelling. So be it. The other O that we have for you is O for observe. That's, I think, the magic element that every storyteller should have in his or her bag. If you're telling stories, you have to observe your audience very, very closely. Whether they are laughing, what emotions are they going through? Are they going through the highs and lows with the story the way you had imagined it to be? Sometimes I design a story performance in a way that I want my audience to feel certain emotions. And that is what is most gratifying, to see that whether they are feeling it at all or not. And the various reactions, whether it's a smile or whether it's a huge boisterous laugh, whether they clap, whether they are shocked because they see a performer perform with so much of guts. So whatever be that emotion, one has to really have a very keen eye, observe your audience. Observe your audience for all the verbal as well as non-verbal reactions that they have to your story, because it is very important. It is important for you to judge yourself by the way the others are responding to you live. It is not what they come and tell you after they have heard a story. It is that then at that moment while you're telling your story and how your audience is reacting to you is very important. Sometimes reactions of children in a classroom comes in varied degrees. A same story may make one child cry, may make another laugh. So therefore, your observation skills of having told a story in a classroom with a similar group of children has to be very acute. You cannot uh, address one address one you cannot address one reaction and take it and celebrate it, well as not acknowledge the other. So therefore, observation of your audience, because we are watching them, we're watching their faces, we're watching their emotions, we're watching their reactions, has to be noted. You have to note it, and you have to also perhaps sometimes go out of the way and speak to your audience, speak to members in your audience, and find out what did they find interesting, what was going in their head when they heard something like that, because you observed that they reacted in a certain way. That is what makes a storyteller make that story bridge with the audience. I hope you enjoyed these tips, and you will be back next week for another edition of ABC of Storytelling. Until then, happy storytelling.